Hello, Spark fans. So it is the morning after day one of the Data and AI Summit 2021 US edition. And what a keynote of all the announcements in the world. So yeah, lots and lots of things got announced at the kickoff, which has all the engineering keynotes. So later today we'll have day two, and there'll be a load of data science announcements and various things, what they've been up to, and that should be good as well. But yeah, as always, I thought I'd want to do a quick roundup of all these myriad different features that have now been announced, what they are, what it means to us, and why we should care. So join me for a bit of a dive into such things as Delta Lake 1.0, Delta sharing, Delta live tables, there's a naming convention you might be able to see, Unity catalog, and some updates to the Photon engine, which kind of makes me wish I should have done last week's video next week. That would have made much more sense, wouldn't it? Cool. Anyway, so yes, as always, do not forget to like and subscribe. If you're new here, welcome, hello, and let me know what you think. So that is a whole load of announcements. Do you think there's too many things? There's too much spread of focus? Do you think this is amazing and exciting because we're getting all this good stuff? Do you think that slowly Databricks is growing to be more than just this transformation engine and actually it's spreading out its tendrils? I would love to know what you think in all this space. It is an interesting time to be a Spark nerd. So, right, let's have a look. So first things first, the keynote kicked off with a surprising start for the start of the keynote, which was Ali chatting to the father of modern data warehousing, or the father of data warehousing, not modern, Bill Inman. And honestly, it's quite a strange chat. So Bill, after being very against data lakes originally, has now decided that the lake house is the future and is writing a book to help us define the future. And I find it quite strange. But I'm not going to say anything else about that. Let's just leave that. You go watch the keynote if you haven't already. You guys can make your own minds up. Okay, but on to actual announcements. So first things first, we had all the Delta Lake 1.0 announcements. So Delta is its own open source product in the Linux Foundation, and it's now finally reached version 1.0. So it is the first baseline productionized version. There's enough features in there. There's enough things in there to make it a solid, real version, which is very cool. There's a whole bunch of features that Michael Umbus went through in terms of this is the latest release, has added even more stuff in. Things like generated columns, which if you're coming from the relational world, it's like, yeah, calculated columns, fine. If you're coming from Parquet and big data and all that kind of stuff, the ability to say, I don't want to keep the full date column and the year and the month and the day as separate columns, which is separate storage, which needs their own separate compression. Just go, well, I can just calculate this on the fly, and I can even do partitioning on it, is really cool. So all that good stuff, loads of things in there. On the Delta Lake, Delta IO website, there's loads more stuff about what was actually in this release. So more stuff in terms of the merge operations now gone into the open source one. Better APIs to create and work with tables. Now, this is huge. For a long time, it's been, you can only really work with Delta if you're going through Spark. And actually, they've kind of lifted the lid on that and said, well, hey, how about being able to do that through Python, through R, through SQL, through other things, and actually make it not as tied down into the Spark engine. So that's really cool. Being able to just get it without the Spark engine is awesome. Generated columns, as we said, simplified storage and experimental support for new storage. Again, just making it more available. Making it so it works on Google storage, making it so it works on IBM cloud storage, making it so you can use it in a whole load of different configurations, essentially just making it more prevalent, more transferable, just spreading it out into the world, which is awesome. Better exceptions, which is good. The PyPy release, which is great. So we've got a straight Python library. We can just PyPy, or pip install, what Delta Spark, and just start using it. So loads of really good bits and pieces in there just to actually make it this much more adoptable, much more kind of prevalent file format. So really good stuff. Congratulations to the team. I know kind of there's a real strong community support for Delta Lake. So yeah, congrats to everyone involved. That is awesome. Okay, what do we see next? So next time we've got this thing called Delta sharing. So Delta sharing is trying to get over this problem of saying, to access the Delta table, you need to be able to call the data, to have some kind of Delta reader on top of the actual Delta transaction log. You need to be able to read that transaction log, perform some kind of queries on it to say, which files should I read, what file skipping should I do, all that kind of stuff. That'll then tell you the list of files you should read, and you can read them. So it's kind of like a little chatty operation you need to do to be able to actually access data that's held within a Delta format. Now, Delta sharing is looking to say, what if someone's in a different platform? What if they're in a different subscription, a different cloud tenant? What if they're in a different cloud platform? They're in AWS, you're in Azure, you're in GCP, whatever it happens to be. What if they're trying to access it with something that didn't really understand Delta? And so it's this problem that you've got all these different people, all these different systems. And if you want to make Delta this kind of absolute global, adopted by everything that is big data, you've got to be able to connect to it better. So Delta sharing is a way of essentially kind of serving up support for Delta to other systems via an open source protocol. So they've open sourced it. It's now part of Delta.io. And it's essentially you have a server, so something as your Delta sharing server that other things can then call and say, can I access this table? Can I get a hold of this? And it'll then send back a load of direct file URLs with air that's already signed. That will kind of, you don't have to worry about the authentication stuff because it's managing that as part of the service. So then essentially the calling server just gets told, go read these files. Here's a link that's signed so you can get access to it. So it just really, really simplifies the idea of just saying, I don't want to send you my data. I'm going to pick up my data and just put it next to you. But if you want to query my data, if you want to have something regularly coming in, accessing my data and pulling it out, if I want to put it into a Power BI Tableau report, and we had demos of that in the Keynote, then you can do that. You can put it behind this serving layer. So we see things like this. We see kind of that serving layer. So I've got my Delta table. I've got my Delta sharing server, which Databricks can act as its own Delta sharing server. And then we have other clients going, can I get some table? Can I get this table with these filters? Could I get this table joined to this thing? And then it'll just give me direct access to the underlying cloud storage. So yeah, really cool. It's obviously so new. We haven't really seen the patterns and kind of the various use cases. There's just lots of different scenarios where it could be very, very useful. Now, one of my first questions here was, cool, okay, how much am I going to have to pay to have a cluster turned on that's permanently serving out my Delta tables? Because that's already an issue with Delta. I need to access it through Spark, or I did until V1. And I jumped into one of the AMAs, asked that question, and you don't. So Matei was saying that actually because it's such a lightweight protocol and it's just, all it's doing is reading the translog and telling you where to go, they're going to build it into the Databricks workspace service. So you shouldn't need a cluster to be able to use Delta sharing. And that is really, really exciting. Essentially just making Delta much more accessible as long as you've got Delta workspace that can see it, which is very, very cool. So loads of things in there. Again, I will drop that blog, drop the blog, go and have a look, go and actually see how that works and see all the different things we can do. The syntax looks super easy. That create share on this table, and then suddenly it's a shared thing and other things can access it, is all kinds of awesome. Go have a look at that. Okay, right, we're getting through it. Next, we moved on to this thing. This is just a snippet of one of the features of a thing called Delta Live Tables. Delta Live Tables just has huge amounts of stuff in it. And it's trying to make the whole process of building a data engineering pipeline easier. All these different steps that we go through, from bringing the data in to cleaning it into a new version of it, and then to transforming it to various curated versions of it, managing data quality, managing governance, managing lineage and dependencies, tracking metadata and cataloging, doing classifications of data. There's all these different things which are just part and parcel of data engineering. That is what we do. And so why do we just build it? Why don't we just build a thing that does it? So this is one example of some of the stuff that it does. So things like decorative data quality expectations, which is huge. If you come across Python's Great Expectations, where you can essentially sort of write something on a data frame and say, I expect that this value is less than this. This value is between these two values. This value passes down to this thing or meets the regex criteria or whatever it happens to be. And then you can just build those in as expectations and have them automatically tracked as part of your pipeline without having to manually hard code or hand crank the Spark that's doing it. So some really cool ideas that are baked in to live tables. So there is some docs out. There's not a huge amount of detail around. Let's see what we have. So I think there we go. That's what I was saying about the automated testing. So based on your expectation, you can have it automatically track that lineage of how many things met those expectations. So just data quality measuring and metrics baked into your very service, which is cool. You get this idea of lineage. So the examples that we're showing had this whole I'm writing a table. So create my table, create my live table. So it's a new syntax for live tables over this other thing via a select statement. And then you can then have another table based on that. So you can create a chain of dependencies, and it will actually build out something that looks like this, a lineage of, well, if I want to process that, I need to run this data and then this pipeline and then this pipeline and have it flowing through based on the dependencies of the individual tables. So it's less of I'm going to build an orchestration system. I'm going to tell you what to process. And then because I'm the master plan pulling the strings at the end, it'll come out with the right answers. This is just telling the table, this is what you're based on. If I want to refresh you, go and get the data from the things that you rely on. It's interesting things in there. And again, that's about as much info as we have that's currently published. There isn't a huge amount out there. Okay, that is the example I was talking about in terms of that. Doesn't want to go any bigger. That whole idea of what that live tables look like. So we can create a live table over the raw data and then create a live clean data over the raw data table, and it builds up that idea of dependencies. So really, really super interesting. What that means in terms of having a cluster turned on to serve the live tables, what's managing the metrics, where's your data stored. Believe your data is stored as another Delta table. So you kind of almost a bit like a Kimball style audit fact that's kind of automatically stored alongside your Delta tables if you've got expectations of that data. Just loads and loads of stuff in there. Obviously, that is several future videos all on its own in terms of the different features and the different ways that we can challenge our current pipelines and our current orchestration protocols. Huge amounts of stuff in there. Okay, we're halfway through. Okay, Delta sharing, we've already had a look at. Oh no, this is not Delta sharing, this is Unity Catalog. This is an entirely new thing. So, for a long time, there have been two kind of gaps in what we can do inside of Databricks. One, the data catalog is not great. So the inbuilt Hive metastore makes things so simple. If you've been working with Spark before Databricks, and you're used to setting up and managing and maintaining your own Hive metastore, that's fairly painful. So the fact that it's almost like not a problem in the slightest when you're in Databricks shows how well integrated it is. But it doesn't do a lot. You can have a comment against a particular column. You can't tag data classifications. You can't tag access policies on certain columns, only on the actual individual data objects. It's always been slightly limited as to how detailed and how deep we can get in terms of the data governance activities that we're doing. Essentially, the Hive metastore was never a data governance tool. It's a data engineering tool to be able to get hold of the data with a limited bit of data discovery. What Unity Catalog is saying it should be a data governance tool. It should have all the power and the features and the extensibility of a full data governance tool. So we're going to see things like this. So we're going to see this Unity Catalog, which from what I've seen will look very similar to the baked in Hive metastore, just do a load more stuff. So you can see it's serving up different parts of data, and it's saying different people get different parts of that table. So if we can do things like row level security by just automatically based on privileges rather than having to build out views that say is member and all that kind of stuff, that is already a massive feature. So looking at, as it says, fine-grained permissions on tables, fields, and views is really, really interesting. And then extending it, and so we can have things that are registered in our Unity catalog. Now, they were talking about this as a future roadmap, so it's not all in there for the initial preview releases, but being able to register parts of SQL databases and ML flow models. So being able to just register, hey, here's a model, you've got access to the model. If someone's looking for things, they can get access to things that are in the ML flow registry. Things that have been shared via Delta that might be on another service. All in a single catalog. All in a very security controlled way. So it's like the Hive metastore plus table access control jammed together and given a load more power and a load more functionality. So very cool. Okay, more stuff. They were talking about all the problems that they had in there, making it accessible from other platforms via Delta sharing. So it's tying into this whole new story. Other stuff that's in here. So the ability to pass out different elements. And so, we've seen grant permissions in table access control before. So being able to say we can pass certain views out, we can do that kind of thing. We can do it based on groups is again very, very good. But this is really interesting. I think that's one of the pictures I pulled out. Attribute-based access control. So being able to tag various different tables, various different objects in my Unity catalog and say, well, your PII, you're sensitive, you're highly confidential, you're whatever the different classifications I make of my tables, and then apply grants based on that. So I can say, well, you're allowed to access sensitive data, and then automatically that means that you have privileges to be able to select any table that's tagged as sensitive data. So being able to just manage it, it's like a different cross-section of how we manage data access control, and it's all baked in from the start, which is very, very cool. Loads and loads of things in here. There's a nice shiny UI, which is cool. So we've got all things that we would expect of this kind of thing. We've got lineage baked in where you can find it, especially if you're using Delta Live tables. We've got the schema. We can go and edit the schema. We can now finally, we have a visual view of what permission to be granted on that table, which has been really painful when we've been using table access control. So loads of stuff in there. Now, massive questions come up going, I got Azure Purview, I've got Unity Catalog. How is that going to work together? Are they going to work together? Or is it a choice in going, well, I have some data over there, some data over there. And everyone knows the best data governance tools have silos of data metadata. So yeah, massive questions about how this is going to integrate into the rest of the platforms. And that's just on the Azure space. But then if this allows you to actually have that same concept of cross-platform, but it's very specialized towards lakes and lakehouse, and actually gives you a much deeper way of controlling access and doing a load of functionality, and you're using Databricks anyway, there's a load of benefit and there's a huge amount of cool stuff in there. So yeah, it's something we'll see as it emerges, and we'll see kind of how it gels and what kind of working patterns we actually get with the other ways of doing data governance and metadata storage and data dictionaries within our different cloud platforms. So super interesting, loads of stuff in there. Oh, okay, right, nearly there. Okay, had the catalog UI. Finally, we had a load of updates about Photon. So I did a video about Photon last week, and then they've announced that Photon's now going into public preview, and I thought it already was in public preview, and I probably shouldn't have done a video. So one of the things that we always saw with Photon is they tackled the big data problem. They were like, hey, look, you're trying to service a report, and that report's coming from a petabyte of data. Look how amazing and fast we can make it. And everyone's like, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. But, that's not the kind of problems I have, because I've pre-aggregated my data into a data mart, and I just want to serve that to my users. And Photon always kind of fell down there. All of Spark falls down there. So it's really good to hear that in the past few months, past 6 months since the last kind of summit, Reynolds Zinn and his team so everyone working on the Photon engine has been looking at, actually, what do our users actually want? What are people trying to use this as a BI serving layer, as the cornerstone of analytics and organization? What kind of problems do they have? And it's all classic Spark problems. Small queries, a mix of small and large queries coming in. So having one massive query blocking the entire Spark cluster with a few small quick queries sitting in the queue until some slots free up. Many small files is just the classic. But yeah, actually the small queries, that idea of I've just got 500 tiny queries. And actually sometimes that has way more performance problems than just one massive query, which can natively scale. And then actually, how do we get results out into the cloud vendors? So I'm calling it from Power BI. How do I get data to Power BI in the most efficient way, rather than sending it as a single stream of data, which is never going to be particularly performant? So all of these problems, actually, so in the keynote, Reynolds Zinn goes through, actually, this is how they've tackled it. And these are the results that they've had. And they're showing us some very impressive results in terms of how much better that query engine has got. So all the kind of traditional, is this good enough to use behind Tableau? Is it good enough to use behind Power BI? Made a lot better because the engine enhancements, because of some of the way they've done dynamic partitioning behind the scenes to optimize for some of these kind of problems, because of how they've now split out into two queues. So rather than just having, this is the queue of queries on my Spark engine, it's here are the big queries and here are the small queries. And so they've got this idea of like a little express lane to sneak in the small queries to serve them better, so that overall all users have a better perception of the speed and performance of the system. Just nice little smart, good maturity kind of things that are making this a feasible option to do that kind of query serving. And the BI results retrieval, super interesting, because that's basically saying, rather than just serve the data directly, we're going to serve the data and occasionally either dump data to the cloud store or just tell the BI protocol where it is in the cloud store. So if it doesn't have to actually be the things going, here's the data, I'll give you some Parquet. You can just go read that file. Here's some results, and also read that thing. So it actually has a 2-lane approach, which actually allows them to have way more throughput to get data out into various BI tools. And again, that is a super high-level explanation of it. I don't know too much of the details behind it yet, but just the whole idea is the kind of things that they're working on, the kind of things that they're tackling in this keynote is tackling the exact kind of problems people have been working with me going, well, that doesn't quite work. Oh, I like that. If only it worked with, and there's just so many things just ticked off in terms of that kind of improvement and that kind of focus, which is just really promising to see. And breathe. So I know that was a huge old rant about so many different features coming out, but altogether that is a really promising look at what's actually going on in industry, across all the things that are going on. There's just a huge amount of stuff. So across Delta going 1.0, which is great, amazing. Across live sharing, allowing us to actually improve access to our data. Across the Unity catalog, which is just data governance and just a load of that improved security management and role-based control and privilege-based control with classifications. With Delta live tables and just a huge amount of the traditional engineering tasks now automated. And then finally, Photon getting even better. So just loads of good stuff that we've seen. Huge amounts in there. I do encourage you, if you haven't already, just go and watch that keynote and actually just hear from them. This is all the good stuff that happened and all what they've been working on. Now, throughout the Data and AI Summit, there's been some AMAs, some deep dive sessions. Again, it's very early for a lot of these products, so we're kind of getting our first glimpse, our first lifting the hood and seeing what's in there. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know which is your favorite of those, which is the one that's really going to change how you work. Which is the one that you're like, why did they build that? You don't quite see the use case yet. And yeah, otherwise, let me know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to be hanging around the conference later today, doing some chats, hanging around various AMAs. So give me a shout if you see me, and don't forget to say hello. Otherwise, have a good time.